is pretty funny just to watch Bernie Sanders' response to Anderson Cooper outline the difficulties the Trump administration is having.
President Trump today talked about his intentions again to repeal and replace Obamacare. There certainly does not seem to be an agreed upon plan by the Republicans how to replace Obamacare. We haven't heard any real details. Do Democrats have an obligation to do more than just not help the Republicans in their efforts?
You mean to say that Democrats should work with Republicans to repeal this legislation? No, I don't think our job is to work with them to repeal the legislation. What our job is to work with them to improve the legislation. Is the Affordable Care Act perfect? Far from it. It needs to be improved. We wait eagerly for the Republicans to come forward with a proposal that will improve the Affordable Care Act. Let's work together.
I'm wondering when you heard the president today saying, quote, nobody knew that health care could be so complicated. I thought nobody knew health care would be anything but complicated, but apparently the president said nobody knew that it would be so complicated. Were you surprised by that?
Well, some of us who were sitting on the Health Education Committee who went to meeting after meeting after meeting, who heard from dozens of people who stayed up night after night trying to figure out this thing. Yeah, we got a clue. When you provide health care in a nation of 320 million people, yeah, it is very, very complicated.
I mean, with all due respect to Bernie Sanders, I don't even think you need to go to the committee meetings to know that. I think you just needed to be like an adult and with some vague passing interest in how government works to realize this. Like, you know, when you see those things, like those, you read stories or you see movies of, or history of like, where, the king is like 8 years old. Like the king dies and the only son is 8, so they elevate the king. I mean, that's what we're dealing with. Except that 8-year-old also a little unbalanced.
Yeah, I was going to say the
not
8-year-old.
a level-headed 8-year-old.
And the arrogance of wealth.
Right, exactly. Like a really bad, like imagine King Joffrey if he was just a little bit younger.
No spoilers.
Or
No spoilers from 7 years ago on Game
King
of Thrones.
Joffrey, if he had a little bit less of an understanding of the policy portfolio of
Right.
But on the other hand, I mean, it's Bernie's one of the only people who I think because like Republicans have long fetishized not knowing what you're talking about when it comes to federal government, and then centrist Democrats have fetishized making everything too complicated and technocratic. Bernie's one of the only people who sort of has a balance of like, let's be real and empirical, but also hopefully not make it so overly complex.
Yeah, also the videos about that where it was contrasting Trump saying it's no one would have guessed how complicated with a bunch of Obama saying this is how complicated it is, right? And that sort of goes back to the problem of, well, it didn't have to be so complicated if you go Medicare for all or single payer.
Yeah, exactly. And if you didn't, and some of them really do fetishize the complexity.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Subscribe.